Stranger Things wrapped up back in December of 2025. Final season, finale, theatrical release, sold out screenings, the whole send off. It's been a few months now, the dust has settled, and the conversation has shifted from how does it end to something bigger. Will anything like this ever happen again? Not will Netflix make another hit, they will. They already have a dozen shows chasing that high. I mean, will there ever be another show that hits like this one did? Same size, same grip on the culture, same everyone talking about it at once feeling. And I don't think there will be. Not because nobody's talented enough to write it, but because the moment Stranger Things landed in doesn't exist anymore. The moment is gone and it's not coming back. Now, let me explain what I mean. Stranger Things dropped in July 2016. Doesn't sound like a special date, but look at what was actually happening around it. Streaming was still young enough that a handful of shows could genuinely dominate the conversation. Netflix wasn't yet the size it is now. It didn't have hundreds of originals fighting each other for your attention every single week. If Netflix put something out and it was good, there was a real chance you'd hear about it, because there wasn't 50 other things releasing the same week burying it. Compare that to right now. Every streamer, Netflix, HBO Max, Apple, Amazon, Disney Plus, they're dropping new prestige shows constantly. Even great shows get maybe 2 weeks of main character energy before the algorithm moves on to the next thing. There's just too much content and too little collective attention span left over. Second thing, 2016 was smack in the middle of an 80s nostalgia wave that hadn't been fully cashed in yet. You had the Ghostbusters remake, the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack, the synth-heavy scores becoming trendy again, and the culture was really warming up to let's revisit the 80s, but nobody had really nailed it yet on TV. Stranger Things showed up and did it better than anyone. Kids on Bikes, Spielberg and Stephen King and John Carpenter all blended into one show. It felt fresh because it was early. If the exact same show dropped today, it'd just be another entry in the genre that's been mined for a decade. Stranger Things itself is a big reason that mine got dug out. Basically, it was new at being nostalgic. That's a one-time trick you can't do again. Here's the bigger piece though, and it's less about the show and more about us. 2016 was one of the last times that a huge chunk of the internet was still kind of in the same room. I mean, think about it. TikTok didn't exist yet, and Twitter was still mostly one big shared timeline instead of it being personalized for each person. YouTube recommendations worked differently. Group chats, forums, water cooler conversations. There was more overlap in what people were consuming. When Stranger Things became a hit, it became a hit everywhere at once. Halloween costumes that year were wall-to-wall 11 and Demogorgons. It wasn't a niche thing that blew up in one corner of the internet. It was inescapable, the way a big summer blockbuster used to be inescapable. Now, attention is completely fragmented. Everyone's in their own little bubble. A show can be genuinely massive, millions and millions of views, and still not create that everyone's talking about it feeling, because everyone doesn't gather in the same digital space anymore. There's no single town square left for a show to conquer. Netflix has said Stranger Things is one of the most watched English language shows in the platform's history, but raw numbers aren't really the point here. Wednesday did numbers too, Squid Game did numbers too. What Stranger Things had that's harder to replicate is the shared cultural conversation that came with the numbers. Big viewership is common now, a genuine monoculture moment is not. You could make a show exactly as good as Stranger Things today, and it would still land differently because the room it's landing in has changed completely. Here's a good way to see what that monoculture moment actually looked like in practice. When season 4 used Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, a song that was already decades old, it didn't just get a little streaming bump. It shot back up the charts worldwide, hit #1 in the UK, cracked the Billboard Hot 100 top 10, and introduced an entire new generation to a song from 1985. That's a pure example of a show reaching so far into the culture that it rewrote the charts for a 40-year-old song. That kind of ripple effect needs a genuinely unified audience to work. Because if a show today used a deep cut 80s song in a big scene, you might see it in a trend in a certain corner of TikTok for a week, but you're not seeing it climb the actual Billboard charts, because there's no single wave big enough left to carry it there. Now, the moment mattered, obviously, but so did the people. And this part genuinely can't be manufactured on purpose. The Duffer Brothers cast a group of mostly unknown kids. Millie Bobby Brown, Finn Wolfhard, Gaten Matarazzo, Caleb McLaughlin, Noah Schnapp, and that ensemble had a chemistry you can't cast for on paper. You can hold auditions, sure, but you can't really predict if that ensemble is gonna have a great chemistry on screen. It either happens or it doesn't. And the show got to do something that almost no series gets to do anymore, which is grow up with its cast in real time. across nearly a decade and then use that growth as part of the story. The awkward transition from season 1 kids to season 5 young adults wasn't a flaw. It became part of the emotional arc. Audiences watched these actual humans grow up alongside their characters. That's not a repeatable formula. That's what happens when a show runs long enough and the cast stays committed enough and nobody gets swapped out or recast and the whole thing somehow doesn't collapse under its own hype for 8+ years. A lot of things had to go right in a row for a long time. Most shows don't get that runway anymore. They get 1 or 2 seasons to prove themselves before a streamer cuts them loose. Just think about how strange that actually is, logistically. Studios usually try to avoid this exact situation. Kid actors age out of roles, voice changes, faces change, and continuity becomes a nightmare. Most shows either recast, time skip around the problem, or just don't run long enough for it to matter. Stranger Things didn't avoid it, but yet leaned into it. By the final season, these were actors in their 20s playing characters who would have aged 19 months in the story, but nearly a decade in real life, and the show used that mismatch on purpose. You can't storyboard that part in advance. You can only get lucky enough that your cast stays intact long enough to let it happen naturally, and then be smart enough to notice it and write towards it. Now look, I know what some of you are thinking. Networks and studios try to recreate this kind of lightning constantly. That's literally the entire business model. Every streaming service has thrown money at the next Stranger Things. And some of those shows have done well. Wednesday is a legitimate hit, Squid Game became a global phenomenon in its own right, so clearly big TV moments can still happen. But notice that none of these shows are being talked about as the next Stranger Things. They became their own thing, with their own kind of cultural footprint, because the specific ingredients that made Stranger Things what it was, an untapped nostalgia wave, a still unified internet, and an unrepeatable cast growing up on camera aren't available to copy. You can chase the outcome, but you can't recreate the conditions. That's really the whole argument. It's not that nobody can make a great show again. Great shows get made all the time. It's that the specific kind of cultural event Stranger Things was, a monoculture hit built on a nostalgia wave that nobody else had cashed in yet, watched by an internet that was still mostly one audience, it needed a moment that simply is not here anymore. Maybe that's part of why the ending hit the way it did, and why people are still thinking about it months later. I mean, other than the fact that it was lackluster. But the show wasn't just closing out its own story. A lot of people were quietly saying goodbye to a version of watching TV that doesn't really exist anymore either. I mean, of course, we'll get more big shows, we'll get more nostalgia, but we might even get another cast that clicks the way this one did. That part's weird, but it's not impossible. What's genuinely gone is the room they'd be releasing into. That's why it feels so nostalgic for some people, including myself. The internet that Stranger Things launched into in July 2016 just doesn't exist anymore, and nothing that comes next gets to launch into it either. That's the real reason why there won't be another show like this. Not because nobody's good enough to write it, but because nobody gets to have that room again. That was a once in a lifetime opportunity. But, yep, it's just my take. See ya.